Okay, guys, this is day number 4 of industrialization, immigration, and urbanization. We are zipping along. Okay, we ended up with the newsies. If you remember, we were talking about kids working, and the newspaper kids basically got a corner. And when they got the corner, they sold their papers, usually I believe for a nickel, and they would get 2 cents of it. The paper would get 3 cents of it. Then they went up to a dime, and they still would get only the 2 cents. And so these are the first groups that actually go on strike, the newsies. These kids got up like at 3 o'clock in the morning to go get their papers and then get to the corner that they were selling their papers. And if they were sick, somebody could get their good corner. They would have their regular customers. Now they would do morning as people were going to work, and then there would be an afternoon edition, so they would go back, pick up their papers about 3 in the afternoon, and be ready when the people got off at work at 5 to sell the papers. If it was a theater night, then there would be a late edition, and they would actually have a paper that they would sell after the theater got out at maybe 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. So these kids were up and working long, long hours.
Papes and the newsies, line up!
They jacked up the price of papes.
If we don't sell papes, nobody sells papes.
This is a fight we have to win!
And what's the last news story you wrote?
What's the last strike you organized?
Answer the call and don't delay.
You're behind this.
We're doing something that's never been done before. My old friend, I can't spend my whole life dreaming.
In a fine life, carrying the pen through it all. A mighty fine life, carrying the pen a tough and tall. Look at me, I'm the king of New York. Of New York.
Okay, so that was the first strike by the kids, and guess what? They were successful. Okay, this is a young man from Mobile, Alabama, and they got paid by the piece. Basically, when the shrimp boats come in, they would sort them by size and weigh them. And he was a shrimp picker, and so he would get up very early in the morning when the shrimp boats came in and be picking shrimp. These are the Breaker Boys. This is a famous picture by a guy named Lewis Hine. And the Breaker Boys are working in the coal mines. So even though they have these scarves they put over their mouth, you can see that they are getting this coal dust into their lungs. And as we said, life expectancy for coal miners was not a long life. They developed this thing called black lung disease. Basically, when they coughed, this black tarry substance would come up. And some of these kids didn't see 40, 45, 50 years old. There was a very erratic economy back during this time. So you've got high booms and very, very steep busts, booms and busts. So this is called the business cycle. And quite often, if you get down into this trough type area, this is where we enter recession and depression. So going down is a recession. If you stay down here too long, it's a depression. You got recovery, you got the peak, and then back down again. And what you're looking for is a nice even line. But the economy back during this time was not like this. The division of wealth. 1% of the population had 90% of the wealth. This is not a good thing. This means that you have a lot of poor people, and you've got a very few people that are pretty much dominating the whole of the Americas. So 1% of the population controlling 90% of all the wealth. So what is gross national product? Okay, so basically it's everything that's made during a year in the United States or in the world. They actually figure gross national product for each country to see basically where they rank in the world of making things. We used to be very, very high, but we don't make as much stuff anymore. We import more than we export. So for instance, they would take the whole computer. They wouldn't do the keyboard and the mouse and everything. If it comes as a package, that's what they look for the gross national product. And that's a ranking system. In 1873, we had a terrible, terrible panic. The Wall Street, you know, we always think of the 1929 Wall Street crash. This was a crash. 10 days, the stock market was closed. Many of the nation's railroads went bankrupt. Lots of businesses failed, and there was unemployment from 14 to 24%. So you actually saw this when you did the presidential quiz the other day, and this is going to throw our nation into an economic panic. What happens now? Labor is trying to organize so they can protect their workers.
Letter just come for you, Mark Church.
It was called the Panic of 1873. Reckless overbuilding on the Northern Pacific Line had already brought the railroad to the brink of ruin. When on September 18th, the bank that backed it went under.
I've invested in railroad securities with J. Cook and Company for years. Very reliable. Securities with J. Cook and Company.
Within days, the entire national banking system had collapsed. And once the reign of misfortune began, it didn't stop. Before the disastrous year was out, more than 1 million Americans were out of work, and the nation had been plunged into the worst depression in its history.
Things were pretty dismal, So labor unions are going to try and protect workers. However, they have a lot of problems organizing. These are many of the reasons that they had problems: workers changing jobs, people speaking different languages. These unions had different goals and priorities. Companies certainly didn't want them. They engaged in things called lockouts. Scabs were hired to break through the picket lines, and public didn't realize how awful it was, and they looked at the strikers that they were just causing problems. Law enforcement sided with big business, and people were made to sign yellow dog contracts. A yellow dog contract was, in order to get a job, employers forced workers to sign an agreement that they would not join a union and would not strike. So you can see that the unions had their jobs. Also, many of the owners believed that anyone could get rich if they worked hard enough. This is a myth of the self-made man. Do you believe this is true? I know a lot of people that work real hard that aren't very rich. So, what is labor to do? They are to organize and one of the very first strikes was the late railroad strike of 1877. Going from you can see that these folks could get together and organize. Their pay had been cut. Their work day was long. They had no more perks with free rides, and it spread from city to city. Over 100 were killed during this strike, and 1,000 were jailed. This was the violence that ensued in Baltimore. Thousands of sympathizers surrounded the armory and threw rocks, and then the soldiers came out and 10 strike workers were killed. They were, the National Guard called out. In Chicago, it says terror reigns the streets of Chicago. In St. Louis, strikes were occurring every hour. Miners and steel workers came to the defense, and they basically were siding with the railroad people. 5,000 armed workers and soldiers exchanged gunfire throughout the night, and you can just see violence. So this man, he is trying to organize the very first big union called the Knights of Labor. At its peak, it had over 700,000 members, and his name is Terence Powderly. And I always remember Powderly because he does have that little booty chin, and I think of him powdering his chin. So Terence Powderly, the head of the it was open to everybody, and he believed in arbitration. Arbitration is basically working it out, bringing grievances to the bosses and trying to work out a solution. But it'll fail. Why? Lack of organization. They made unreasonable demands. They wanted a 40-hour work week, for goodness sake. So this is Powderly in his older days. You can see they had women in the union, and it was a very large union, but this is going to be the day. They just aren't powerful enough, as typified by this political cartoon. As you can see, you got the rich cats over here, you got the workers over here, and you got the railroads here that are much too powerful. The final kind of nail in the coffin was the Haymarket Square riot. It was a meeting in Chicago, and they called for workers to come bearing arms. A large group of union workers met. A bomb goes off. 7 policemen are killed. 4 workers are killed. And 8 union leaders are arrested and tried for inciting a riot. 4 are executed. And this breaks up the union. Another massacre is called the Ludlow Massacre. This is in Colorado. And miners were on strike, thrown out of their homes. It's winter. The owners call in the militia, and 20 people are shot and burned to death. 12 women and small children are found huddled in the I'll post this link. This is Aftermath Massacre and the monument. Mother Jones is a labor leader for 50 years, and she is famous for saying, "Pray for the dead, but fight like hell for the living." Her weapon is a hat pin.